Before we begin, make sure you're somewhere quiet. Turn off the lights. Put on your headphones. Because the stories you're about to hear aren't just scary. These are the kinds of experiences people don't talk about. If you enjoy true horror stories, unsettling encounters, and disturbing events that happen to real people, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. I grew up around farms, so the countryside never scared me. Long roads, open fields, animals making noise at night, none of that bothered me. What happened on this farm did. I was 24 when I took the job. It was supposed to be temporary work, just a few weeks helping an older man maintain his land while he recovered from surgery. He lived miles away from the nearest town, far enough that my phone signal disappeared 10 minutes before I reached the property. The farmhouse sat at the end of a dirt road surrounded by cornfields that stretched farther than I could see. No neighboring houses. No streetlights. Just crops, trees, and an old wooden barn leaning slightly to the left. The owner, Mr. Halvorsen, greeted me at the door. He was polite but though. His smile never reached his eyes, and he kept glancing past me toward the fields as if he was expecting something to come out of them. Before I even stepped inside, he said something strange. "If you hear footsteps at night," he said, "don't open the door." I laughed awkwardly, thinking he was joking. He wasn't smiling. Inside, the farmhouse smelled like soil and rot, like damp wood that had been buried and dug back up. Everything looked frozen in time, old furniture, dusty photos, and a calendar on the wall still turned to October, even though it was July. That first night, I slept in the guest room on the second floor. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of movement outside my window. Not animals. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Crunching through dirt. I sat up and listened. The steps stopped directly beneath my window. I held my breath, waiting for them to move away. Instead, I heard fingernails scraping against the wooden siding of the house. I stayed completely still until the sound finally faded back into the fields. The next morning, I asked Mr. Halvorsen if anyone lived nearby. "No," he said quickly. "And nobody should be walking here at night." That day, while repairing a fence near the barn, I noticed something carved into the wood. Names. Dozens of them. Some were scratched out. Some had dates next to them. Most ended abruptly, like whoever carved them never finished. When I asked Mr. Halvorsen about it, his face went pale. "You shouldn't be in the barn alone," he said. "Especially after sunset." That night, the footsteps came back. This time, they weren't outside. They were downstairs. I heard the slow creak of floorboards moving through the house. Not rushing. Not sneaking. Just walking, confidently, like it knew exactly where it was going. I locked my bedroom door and pressed my ear against it. That's when something stopped on the other side. Breathing. Deep. Wet. Right against the wood. Then a voice whispered my name. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I don't know how long I stayed frozen, but eventually the breathing faded, and the footsteps retreated down the stairs. The next morning, I packed my things and told Mr. Halvorsen I was leaving. He nodded slowly, like he had expected this. "Did it speak to you?" he asked. I didn't answer. Before I left, he grabbed my arm. "It doesn't like new people," he said quietly. "It remembers everyone who steps on this land." I left immediately. A month later, I searched up the address out of curiosity. The farm didn't exist. No records. No owner. No property history. Just empty land. And sometimes, late at night, I still wake up to the sound of footsteps outside my window, slow, deliberate, and getting closer. I took the job because I was desperate. After losing my apartment, a farmhand position popped up online offering free housing, cash pay, and minimal supervision. The listing had no photos, just an address and a phone number. The farm was located in a rural stretch of land in Iowa, nearly an hour from the nearest town. When I arrived, I immediately noticed something unsettling. There were no animals. No cows. No chickens. No dogs. Yet the farm was massive, multiple barns, grain silos, equipment sheds, and a farmhouse that looked far too big for one person. The owner, a woman named Margaret, greeted me at the gate. She looked normal enough, late 50s, sun-damaged skin, tired eyes. But she spoke in a rushed, nervous way, as if she wanted to get everything said before something interrupted her. "You'll stay in the back house," she said. "Don't wander at night." That sentence would become a pattern. The guest house sat near the tree line at the edge of the property. From my porch, I could see the main farmhouse and the largest barn, which loomed like a dark silhouette against the sky. The first night, I heard singing. It came from the fields. Low, wordless humming drifting through the corn like a lullaby played at the wrong speed. I assumed it was wind until it stopped abruptly, right when I stood up. The next day, I asked Margaret about it. She froze. "Did you go outside?" she asked. "No." She visibly relaxed. "Good. Don't." Work on the farm was strange. We weren't growing crops. We weren't raising livestock. Most of the tasks involved maintaining empty buildings, reinforcing doors, replacing locks, and repairing fences that had already been fixed. One fence in particular kept getting destroyed. Every morning, the same section was torn apart, not broken, but carefully dismantled. Boards removed. Nails pulled out cleanly and stacked in neat piles. Margaret made me fix it every day. On the fifth night, I woke up to footsteps crunching outside the guest house. Multiple sets. I peeked through the window. Figures stood at the edge of the field. At least 6 of them. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stood there, facing the house. Watching. I didn't sleep after that. The following morning, I confronted Margaret. "There are people on your land," I said. "You need to call the police." She stared at me for a long time before saying, "They're not people." That night, she invited me into the main farmhouse for dinner. I shouldn't have gone. Inside, I noticed the windows were reinforced from the inside with wooden boards. Locks on every door. Deadbolts stacked on top of deadbolts. During dinner, she finally told me the truth. Decades ago, the land had been used as a temporary relocation site during a regional disaster. People were housed in tents and makeshift shelters. Supplies ran out. Help never came. "They didn't leave," Margaret whispered. "They learned the land." She told me the farm existed to contain them. To give them something to watch. Something to fix. Something to keep them calm. The fences weren't to keep animals in. They were to keep them from wandering. That night, the singing returned, closer than ever. I ran for my car. As I reached the driveway, figures stepped out of the corn. Their faces were wrong. Skin stretched tight. Eyes reflecting light like animals. Mouths open too wide, humming that same broken melody. Margaret stood on the porch, screaming at me. "You weren't supposed to leave." I barely escaped. A week later, I checked the listing again. It was gone. So was the address. But sometimes, when I drive past cornfields at night, I swear I hear that humming, soft, patient, waiting for someone new to arrive. My grandfather's farm had been abandoned for over 30 years. At least, that's what everyone in my family said. When he died, the land passed down to me. No one else wanted it. My parents wouldn't even drive past the place. They told me the same thing over and over. Sell it. Don't visit it. That should have been my warning. The farm sat miles from the nearest paved road, hidden behind rolling hills and thick tree lines. The house was old but solid. The barns were massive, far larger than a single-family farm should ever need. What bothered me most wasn't the silence. It was that the land looked maintained. The grass wasn't overgrown. The fences weren't collapsed. Even the gravel driveway was smooth, like something heavy had been driving over it regularly. But no one lived there. The first night, I stayed in the farmhouse. I locked every door out of habit. At 2:17 a.m., something knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. I froze. No one should have been there. The nearest neighbor was miles away. I didn't answer. The knocking stopped. Then it started again, this time from the back door. Then the side door. Always 3 knocks. Always slow. By morning, I convinced myself it was animals. I started exploring the barns later that day. Inside the largest barn, I found something strange, deep grooves carved into the dirt floor, forming massive circular patterns. The marks weren't random. They spiraled inward toward a spot in the center. There was a hatch. Old. Rusted. Heavy. I didn't open it. That night, the knocking returned. But this time, it wasn't on the doors. It was coming from the floor beneath my bed. 3 knocks. Directly below me. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I found old journals hidden in the farmhouse attic. My grandfather's handwriting was shaky, frantic. Entry after entry mentioned the same thing. They don't like when the land is quiet. They move under the fields. Never let the barns empty. I finally understood why the barns were so large. They weren't built for animals. They were built to hide movement. That afternoon, I heard it. A low vibration beneath the ground. Like something massive shifting slowly through dirt. The fields rippled, just slightly, as if something enormous was crawling underneath. I ran to the largest barn. The hatch was open. Something had forced it from below. The smell hit me first, rotting earth, wet metal, something old and breathing. I heard voices coming from the darkness. Not human voices. But voices trying to sound human. "Come down," they whispered. "It's your turn now." That's when I realized the truth. My grandfather didn't abandon the farm. He stayed. For decades. To keep whatever was beneath the land fed. The knocking returned, louder than ever, coming from every wall, every floorboard, the ground itself. The land wanted a caretaker. Someone from the family. I fled that night and never went back. A month later, I checked county records. The farm was still listed as occupied. Under my name. And every few nights, I wake up to 3 slow knocks beneath my bed.